Hi, it's Ros of Scully Gentling About the Books.
And I'm Lindy from Lindy's Magpie Reads.
Hi, and we're back to do a follow-up about reading graphic novels or comics. And I'm the comic newbie, and Lindy's the expert.
Well, enthusiast anyway.
Enthusiast. And a month ago, we did a video where Lindy recommended 3 books for me to try, and I've read them, and we said we'd come and do a bit of a feedback or a follow-up, and then sort of think what I might try next. So that's what we're going to do.
And I'm really looking forward to hearing what you thought of these.
Oh, well, first thing I have to say is what good recommendations they were. You'd really, it's like, there's people that do this sort of book doctor thing or whatever, where they prescribe books for people, don't they? And I was thinking, like, you should do that, because you obviously got inside my head really well to recommend things. So, but of the 3 that I read, if putting it terribly crudely, I'd say there was like a 5-star one and a 4-star one and a 3-star one. I mean, stars are a bit rubbish, aren't they? But as a shorthand. But if I start with the one that was I just absolutely loved this book so much. And that was this one, The Arrival. Now, I have to be, because these are, Lindy very kindly picked things that I'd be able to get from my local library. That means they've got a shiny plastic cover, so I'll try not to get the light caught on it too much. But this was, I thought, just an extraordinarily profound book. And I hadn't previously, I have read some, graphic novels and so on that I've really enjoyed, but I don't think I've ever read one that was as profound as this. It was quite a special experience reading it. And I know you picked it for me, or suggested it partly because it has no words. And one of your recommendations to me about how to get the most out of this sort of reading experience was to slow down and really look at the pictures. And so one like this, and I'm just gonna, there's only the pictures to look at, so that forced me to do that, and then that really paid off. It was really rewarding. There are words, but they're in a language that one can't understand because it's not a real language. It's like an invented, so there's signage and things, and so you see but so it's not like a textless world, but there's no text for you, the reader, to read, as it were. And it's just very moving and very I suppose, because the theme is about you can see being displaced or moving to somewhere that is unfamiliar, and where you're not at home, and you don't know what's going on, and you don't know what the rules are, and you don't know what the habits are, and you don't know how to do things. And that was conveyed so effectively in the images and the partly in the expressions, because the people are very sort of real people, if that, you know what I mean. They're like normal looking people, but the setting is fantastic. And I've got to find this is a lovely, this is a picture that illustrates. So that combination of very sort of real human expression with a very fantastic setting really helped me grasp the emotional content that Shaun Tan, I think, was attempting to convey. So this must be a book that you know well, because you recommended it to me. Is that your kind of reaction to it?
Yes. There's that that feeling of disorientation with that being in a fantastical world.
Yes.
And not having language.
Yeah.
So would you say that that the immigrant experience was part of the attraction for you in this story?
Oh yes, that's when I was saying about, you know, you being the good book doctor, you know, because that is something that really I've read quite a lot of both memoir and fiction that, you know, it is about the immigrant experience or the migrant experience, shall we say, you know, people who move for whatever reason and settle somewhere else, or you know, so that was a theme that really touches me and interests me. So having that as the theme really added to that. That was one of the reasons why it was a 5-star book, because I thought, yes, this really says something quite, as I say, quite profound and meaningful and distinct about that migrant experience. Almost more than words could, because it kind of universalizes it. You know, I've read things about specific, you know, I'm thinking of we'll say, let's say, Behold the Dreamers. I've forgotten is it Mbolo and Bue? You know, a book like that, which is a wonderful book about a very specific migrant experience, you know, coming from a particular country and then being in New York, and you know, and whereas this is sort of looking at it in a more universal way, I suppose, because of, as you say, the fantastical environment. And I loved the way people were, it said something about, I don't know, human decency and warmth and you know, there's a sort of a welcome, there's difficulties and loneliness and sadness and uncertainty, but also like just the way people reached out to the main character, that was very, and you really could see in his expressions the sort of uncertainty and the, do I trust this person? And yes, you know, I'm going to embrace these, when someone reaches out to me, I'm going to embrace that bravely. What a brave man. And it just reminded you of how brave people have to be that do start a new life in a new place for whatever reason. And you didn't really need to know why it was. But you got these different migrants. Some of the other people he met were also migrants to this fantastic city. And you got little bits of their backstory in images, and that sort of almost suggested the different reasons why people might have to make that leap, as it were. So,
and it's a reminder too that there isn't a single immigrant experience. You know, there's a multiplicity. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, indeed. And the other thing that I really liked about this book, another thing that made it 5 stars, I suppose, was the quality, the visual quality of it. I really enjoyed the style, I mean, it's just beautifully drawn, isn't it? And I love the sort of the sepia tones were really appealed to me, I suppose. And yeah, and as I say, just the quality of the artwork, you know, I was really, because I enjoy visual arts, but I don't necessarily expect that in a book. And this was at the top. I felt like this was at the top end of. Would you say that's true?
Shaun Tan is a fantastic artist. That's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, these would stand, you know, lots of the images would stand alone as a piece of art, wouldn't they? Yeah. And then actually you set to fill a whole book with them. I mean, it's incredible, must be incredibly labor intensive process.
That's what graphic novels are. Yes, they're definitely labor intensive.
Yeah. But the sort of this nuance of feeling and emotion and experience in it was much greater than I might have expected. Yeah, in a textless book. So 100% success. Thank you. Shall I talk about the next one? What do you think? Or do you want to think if there's anything you want to recommend on the strength of how much I like that one?
Well, I have some immigrant stories in mind.
Oh, good.
Yes, but again, I need to know more.
Okay.
So keep going.
I'll keep going.
Yeah.
Okay. So the also an enormous success with a very slight qualification as to why it perhaps wasn't. It could have been 5 stars. It was really, I really liked this a lot. It was Fun Home. To try and not get the shine on it. A family tragicomic by Alison. It's Bechdel, isn't it? Not Bechdel. I want to make it Bechdel. I don't know why. Bechdel. And this was a memoir. And you knew that I'd enjoyed a graphic memoir before, so this was a sound recommendation. And this was, there's a lot more text in this without not too much, but it's very much that combination of words and pictures. And with this, I was trying to bear in mind what you'd said about looking at the images with as much care and give as much or more time to those than I gave to reading and thinking about the words. And that definitely paid off and was part of why this was such a pleasure to read, because it's quite a complex memoir, isn't it? And it's non-linear. It goes back and forth in time. It's about quite difficult emotions. Her relationship with her father's relationship with himself, her father's relationship with his whole family, was all, it was very intense and difficult, and like both very rich and I'm trying to think, like the sort of the elements which like real families are like, because it is a real family, between the positives and the negatives, the difficult and challenging aspects of his personality and how he was with his family and how she was with him as his daughter, and versus his enthusiasms and the things that he shared and the things he brought to their life. That was very not simple. And so I suppose it's quite a serious book in a sense.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And very interior. She's examining her inner thoughts and actions and her interrelationships.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And that feeling of this is her adult self looking back at different stages in her childhood and rethinking them in the light of what happens with her father and what happens in her life. You know what I mean? It's like she's not reimagining her childhood, but reflecting on it. And I could really see how it being a graphic memoir added to that. That I really felt like I'm enjoying this more in the format that it is than I would have enjoyed it if she'd just written it. What do I mean? There's something about as you're reading it, because you've got the images, it's like she really uses them effectively to show their reactions to each other or non-reactions to each other, almost like that you're not just in her head, because you could see him or her mother or her brothers and their expressions and their like there's you get into the feelings and experience of all the family members through the images, whereas the words are all her. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. And it really situates you too.
Yes.
In, you know, what their house was like, and, you know, where they would sit in relation to each other.
Yes, yes, exactly. You can see it as you can see the family as a system. You know, talking in sort of therapy terms or so, but you know, you see the family as a system in its environment, and how they look and feel differently when, say, they go away on a trip to a cabin, you know, and you can see how that was different. Not just that the physical environment was different, but psychologically it was a little window, a different window of time for them. And because it's non-linear, the one of the ways the visual element helped was because you could instantly absorb what age she was and what age he was at any point in the story. So because we go back and forth in time, and sometimes she's older, and you know, and you can see, oh, that's toddler her, that must be 8-year-old her, that's teenager, and that's just sort of given to you without, you know, you absorb it, naturally from the image. And how happy or otherwise he was or her mother was at any time. You know, she didn't have to sort of spell that out. You could see it in their not just their expressions, but their I'm trying to think, there's a word for it, isn't there? But you know, their sorry,
body language.
And demeanor, I suppose. But again,
there have been people who found that Alison's expression, especially as when she's younger, seems very blank. But when I read that, I've read it several times, I see it as someone who's just constantly thinking. You know, she's not someone who immediately reacts and shows her feelings.
She doesn't wear her heart on her sleeve,
right,
as we'd say. But you get those little moments of intimacy between her and her father, say, or her and her mother. I felt like her mother was, I wanted to know more about her mother in this book. You know, I felt her mother was missing a bit or underplayed a bit. So that was one of...
Did you know that her second memoir is about her mother?
Well, I didn't know until I finished this, and I read, and then I thought, oh, that's okay. She's done justice to her mother. That's okay. Because I was feeling like I felt her mother got a bit of a bum deal, you know. And I thought, oh no, it's okay if she's done one about her.
So, Are You My Mother is the name of that memoir, and I would say it's a lot more challenging to read. She's got a third memoir that is more about her attraction to physical activity, her own attraction to physical activity. That one is called The Secret to Superhuman Strength.
Whoa.
And she goes through the fitness trends decade by decade, starting in 1960 when she was born. And I think that if you'd like to read another Alison Bechdel, that this would be the next one. You know, and I would say Are You My Mother is more advanced. Okay.
That's helpful, because I might have instinctively gone for that next, because I feel like, oh yes, I want to know more about her mother. But I really like Are You My Mother? Don't get me wrong. But that one is really blended with psychiatry and ideas about psychology, and Winnicott and his ideas. And there's a lot more text. Right.
So, you know, a more text to image ratio.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, so I'll wait on that then. Yeah, yeah. I liked the honesty of this. I mean, she didn't make herself particularly likable always, you know, like, and I was comfortable with that. I like that. I love the fact that one of the points of connection between her and her father was literature. That, you know, I warmed to that, I suppose. Oh, I know the other thing that struck me about why this was better as a graphic rather than purely text-based memoir was about how things looked was really, really important to him.
Right. Yeah.
And so that really that made sense, and you got an understanding of that. Well, and also it was a bit weird and obsessive and difficult for the children.
I don't know if you remember a panel in there where she's only about 6 or 7 years old, and he's telling her those necklines don't match, you know, go change. And actually, I even thought of that as I was thinking, oh well, necklines don't match, I don't care.
Oh dear. So it was, yes. So it was if someone else were to ask me, I would very much recommend it as a interesting, stimulating read. I think if it wasn't quite, I felt if it wasn't quite perfect, I think it's slightly, like a couple of places it went off the boil a bit for me. I think, which like maybe happens in a memoir, you know, and that's maybe okay, you know, that's fine. There were probably things that were more important to her than the reader, if you know what I mean. But that's not a big negative criticism. It's just, you know, I thought like probably no one could bear to say to her, oh, you could trim that bit down a bit, you know, because I wonder how does the editing process work for something like this? Because so much time goes into all the drawing. How you couldn't possibly say, oh, that month's work doing those 5 pages, you know, we're going to cut that out.
That's a good question. I would love to know too.
Yeah. So another big win, without a doubt, and a book that will definitely stick with me. Yeah, particularly because of some of the themes, you know, which are quite, as I say, quite tough themes. I just read another book, which is a novel, you know, where the main character is an embalmer, and I was thinking I'm getting on a bit of a theme with because that's what the father does in this book. It's called A Terrible Kindness. It's a debut novel, just came out in January, and I really enjoyed the embalming theme. Sounds a bit odd, doesn't it? But it's really interesting about, you know, people that do things that most of us might like. We want it to exist, but we find it a bit odd that anyone would want to do that as their occupation, and actually they might find it very meaningful or just run of the mill, you know.
Yeah, and how it's serendipitous that you read a book set in a funeral home.
Yes, exactly. So I was primed for this novel. So number 3,
right,
and that was This One Summer, by Mariko. Is it Tamaki or Tamaki? Do you know? I'm not sure. I'm not sure where the stress should be. I should have looked it up.
well, it's a Japanese surname.
Yeah.
So there's not a particular stress.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, and Jillian, and they're cousins, and this is like a kind of
It's a coming of age story.
Coming of age. Well, I was going to say coming of age, but it's sort of, it's just a little, it's a vignette in someone's coming of age as opposed to the whole, you know, like this takes
one summer.
Yeah, one summer. This you go from child to adulthood, whereas this is fiction, and is a one summer in someone's that one of those crucial moments in her kind of teenage coming of age, and with her and her friend. Now, it's a sensitive, thoughtful, perceptive story about friendships when you're like 11, 12, and one of the things that, and those, it's set in, you know what this obviously, but you know, to say, you know, for people that don't, it's set on a sort of in a summer cabin, you know, so both these families come every summer to stay by the lake for a few weeks, and the two girls meet up every summer and spend time together. So they've kind of grown up together, but in little windows as opposed to all the time. And one's a little older than the other, and that's really quite crucial in this summer, because one is sort of maturing more and the other's that bit younger. It's like, you know, when you're on the cusp of something and one of the two girls is on one side of that cusp and the other is on the other, and that sort of, although they're very, very close and very fond of each other, there's a sort of little tension to that. And one of the brilliant things I thought about this book was that exploring nascent sexuality, nascent sexual attraction, and of the two girls, you know, one gets a bit of a crush on this not particularly nice boy who's a few years older, and the other one, you have the I assumed is actually lesbian, but is only just maybe starting to have some sense of that and doesn't talk to her friend about it at all, you know, but you somehow, that's the feeling that I had, as it were. So they're diverging in that way as well, having been very close friends, and no, I'm sure I felt like, and that will come back together for them, but at the moment they're sort of, you know, yes, almost like starting to explore in different directions or something. I don't know, what did you think about that?
So there's that tension, you know, there's almost a prickliness, you know, as they're kind of irritating each other, you know, that one wants her friend to stay the way they were when they were children, and the other one is like, you know, we're moving on, you know, like, come with me and you know, drool over this guy, cry on him and stuff.
But at the same time, that one, the older one, there's a bit of her that also, you know, which we've all been there, I think, also would like to still just be as she was the summer before when she was a bit younger, and still enjoy all those, you know, like you want to be both at that age, don't you?
Right. And there's a family tragedy that's only hinted at, and that also is you know, a loss of innocence, you know, that's being portrayed there.
Very, very, very much so. So there was like a lot. So this was a book, you know, when sometimes you read a book and you feel the quality, but it doesn't quite hit the right spot for you, and that was how this was for me. So I was interested in the story. I could feel that it was being very well, you know, it's done with real sensitivity and nuance, and the prickle was actually, you know, that prickly feeling was almost like one of my favorite things about it. But I wasn't that, I think there's a bit of me that is, this is going to sound awful, like I'm not that interested maybe in being a teenager.
Okay, fair enough.
not, I mean, like, I've been a teenager and then I've like parented teenagers and, you know, but it's not, it doesn't speak to me as the thing that I most want to spend my time reading about. Although, having said that, in the context of a memoir, I did. So I think it was, if this had been someone's real life, I might actually have latched onto it more. Do you know? But I think because it was, yeah. There we go. Oh, and the other thing I would say is that I wasn't as I wasn't as enthusiastic about the actual visual quality of this book. Not that it's not good. I thought the emotional expression in it was quite strong, but it didn't sort of, visually it didn't appeal to me as much, I suppose.
Okay.
So does that
Yes. So I have an immigrant story that is an entirely different kind of art style. It's Vietnamese family that immigrates to the US, and it shows, well, a refugee experience, multi-generational effects of trauma, the history of French Indochina. You get, context of that. So it's Vietnamese family, and there's the parent and child dynamics, where the kids are trying to fit into a new society, but also that generation, it opens with the kids are now adults having children of their own. And so, you see a sort of a multi-generational effects of colonialism and anti-Asian racism. This is in the US.
Yeah.
And it's called The Best We Could Do. And it's by Bui, B-U-I is her last name. Thi, Thi Bui.
Thi Bui.
So I'm thinking that would be,
a good choice. That sounds like a Ros, a Ros book.
And maybe the Secret to Superhuman Strength, the Alison Bechdel one.
Yeah.
And this one is a novel.
Ooh.
And it's set in contemporary Israel.
Oh, yes.
So the author is Rutu Modan. She's quite a famous cartoonist in Israel. This one is called Exit Wounds, and it's her first book that was translated to English. That was about 15 years ago. And I first read it about that long ago and not since. And I would love to reread it. So if you're interested, only if it interests you, I'm wondering if you might like to do a buddy read of it.
Yes.
There's something about it's in color, so that's a bit different. It's, this clear line art style that's maybe a bit reminiscent of Tintin comics,
Yeah.
And the novel, the story itself, is about a man who's contacted out of the blue by a woman who says that she's been in a relationship with this man's father, and he's disappeared, and she's afraid that he's died in a suicide bombing kind of situation, where bodies weren't identified, and she's afraid. But because she doesn't have family connections, she can't do the investigating.
Yes.
So she needs his help. But he's been estranged from his father. He had no idea, what his father was up to. So this is, the scenario. So contemporary Tel Aviv, I think it's set in 2002.
Right.
So it's like everyday life, but kind of within while there's war going on, you know. This woman who contacts him is actually a soldier.
Right.
You know, that's her job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So does that interest you?
Yeah, so that sounds like as a setup for a novel. That sounds really good, really interesting. Yeah. And the whole what it means to live in a state that is in a state of conflict, whatever is intrinsically interesting, I think, for literature. I mean, I think sometimes I think that some of the issues, that those kinds of issues are sometimes better explored through fiction than non-fiction.
Yeah. And, you know, and this one, you know, the focus is on kind of like the mundane, everyday lives.
Yeah.
And yet you really get an idea of what it might be like to be living with that extra pressure all the time in society.
Yeah. Oh, well, let's do it.
Okay. Sounds good. That sounds like a good plan.
Yeah. And I'm thinking if there's like other people out there that have read either one of the three that I just read or one of the three that I'm now going to go on to read. It would be lovely if they commented and said what they thought.
Yes, definitely.
Or other kind of like similar things that they think, oh, well, you know, if you both like that, why not read this? Yeah, that would be lovely, because all the more recommendations and responses is always great, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. Should we stop there and say we'll report back again for yes?
That sounds good. That's great,
good
Ros.
to me. Okay, I'll hit stop.